We are recording.
Great. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to our July meeting. This year has gone rather quickly. I don't know if anyone else feels a little out of sorts that it's already July. So we are having a workshop today since we are still meeting virtually. We hopefully will see Hannah and Christine and Noah join us, but we know for sure that Megan and Stephen are not going to be here today. Oh, and John, I knew I was missing someone else. Wonderful. So did everyone get a copy of the agenda? Great. John and Christine, are you able to turn on your video?
Megan, I'm trying right now.
Okay. We had some complications with it earlier. Oh, there's Christine. Great. And there's Hannah. Great. Hey, Hannah.
Hey, sorry, I had some difficulty finding the panelist link.
Yes, completely understandable. It's gotten a little more complicated. All right. Well, while John's reconnecting, did anyone have anything you would like to add to the agenda for this evening, or anything that you would like to rearrange or reorder? Great. And did everyone get the minutes for May and June? Did anyone have anything that they thought needed to be added to either of those? Great. All right. Well, those are going into the pile of things we will vote on when we are back in person. So next we have staff updates. And Stacy, do you want to go ahead and start that?
Sure. So Forrest is on vacation, but a press release has been written about the vacancies. And then I believe someone on this board suggested a flyer. So our communications office, we took, it's still pretty texty. We took an abbreviated description from the press release, and she just sent me something. So I'm thinking that that will go out next week. I want to wait until Forrest is back so that if anyone does have questions, they can reach out to him. So I think it has applications are accepted until maybe the middle of August. So we'll release that next week and should start getting applicants. And then those will be presented at the August 30th Joint Water Climate Policy Board, and we can, the commissioners will choose those replacements. So that's the main update from this side.
Great, thanks, Stacy. And then Lily, you're next. Do you have any updates?
I'm currently working with Laura Greats in our strategic initiatives office to see if we can get ICLEI to come give a presentation at one of your meetings soon about the greenhouse gas inventory they did for the city. Other than that, and I guess Megan's on vacation, but I've been talking to her and Carissa Raskin in our strategic initiatives department recently about putting together some kind of survey or tool for the city and certainly GRU and the county if they're interested to kind of document and get a better understanding of like what different projects and initiatives different groups are working on that relate to the different aspects of climate change risks that you guys want to address as part of the plan. So everybody has like a central resource we can look to know what everybody's doing. So I'm supposed to meet with Megan when she gets back to talk about how to structure that and put that together, send it out. The last thing is I have that the rental housing ordinance that the city has been working on for you guys. I sent it to Forrest. I guess I didn't realize he was on vacation. But it was the latest version that was adopted, and it has the energy efficiency standard. So Stacy, if I send it to you, can you send it out to the group?
Mhm.
Okay, awesome. And that's it.
Great, thank you. So I guess we will be on the lookout for that.
And I forgot one thing, Megan, if I
Yeah,
can interrupt.
absolutely.
So the climate vulnerability analysis. So we had done the request for proposals, and we did get 2 proposals, and it went through, the county's review process. Jones Edmonds and Associates out of Gainesville was selected. I was on that committee along with Shane and with an engineer from our Public Works Department. And they submitted a great proposal, and I feel good about it. So now they're going through the contracting process and coming up with more of a refined scope from that. So hopefully we'll come to a good price that's negotiated through the contract part. But yeah, they definitely mentioned like underserved communities several times. It had a focus also on stakeholder outreach. So it really seemed like they would be willing to work with this group and others, not just working in a silo, creating another report that goes on a shelf. So I was pleasantly surprised with the proposal. So we'll keep you in the loop on that.
Great. Does anybody have any questions for Stacy or Lily? Yeah, go ahead, Jensen.
Yeah, Lily, I had a question about the ICLEI coordination. I was able to, or I participated and watched the webinar that they gave on the Race to Zero on June 16th. So it was in our meeting minutes, and I don't know if anyone else on the committee had a chance to see it, but it was a pretty amazing presentation with a speaker from the city of Ann Arbor, where they, put their climate action plan with a focus on equity into place very, very quickly, like right at the beginning of COVID. And so we are a member government. I'm assuming Gainesville and the county are both ICLEI members, correct? So I just wondered, because at the end of the webinar, they said, come speak with us directly if you're, trying to move forward an action plan locally or whatever. There are ways we can help, and it's not fee-based services that they provide. So
I believe we're still a member. I know we have been in the past, and I think we are still.
Yeah, I just wonder if it might be worth following up with someone specifically to talk with our committee here, about what we, the county and the cities, are trying to do. So it was a really impressive webinar.
Do you have somebody in mind? Because all my communication about this so far has been going through Laura Greats, and I guess she has contacts with them. But I didn't watch the webinar, unfortunately, and I wasn't a part of this inventory process or anything, so I don't really have any contacts in ICLEI.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, John.
Was it recorded? Jen?
It
Okay.
was, and I'll post the link. I think I may have forwarded it to Forrest, but maybe he was out on vacation when I sent it.
Okay.
But yeah, I'll
Add it to
definitely
the list.
put the link in.
Okay. Thank you.
John, did you have a question?
No. I just asked if it was recorded, and that's it.
Great. Any other questions for Stacy or Lily? All right. Next, we're supposed to have an update from Robert from GRU, but I don't see him on the call. So does anyone else on staff have any additional updates? Great. Next, we are supposed to have a discussion about in-person meetings. Stacy, was there anything in particular we needed to say about that other than to remind everyone that we are planning to meet in person in September?
I don't think so. I guess just making sure everyone's still fine with that. So that would mean we're in July, so that would mean August would still be a Zoom workshop. And then September would be in person, a public meeting. I imagine it would be in the room I'm in here at EPD. The county is not requiring masks. I mean, things could change in a couple months, but we're not requiring masks. We are strongly encouraging that if people are not vaccinated, that they wear a mask.
Does anybody have any questions or comments about meeting in September? Great. All right. So I realized that I was very late in sending out the video about communications and communication framing. Did anybody have a chance to watch it since Forrest sent it earlier this week? Wonderful. Great. Well, then we will, I sent the video because I didn't want to take up time from our meetings, knowing that we have a tendency to run over. But did anyone have any questions or thoughts or comments about the framing video and using framing to talk about climate change? Am I able to share? Oh, I am. Look at that. So here's just sort of a overview of what was covered in the video. It may be looking a little bit different, but the research that we do focuses on making sure that any communication we have talking about climate change, that we are always starting with a value and why our audience cares about what it is that we are talking about. And that will vary based on our audience and who we are speaking to. So knowing what your community members value is really important. And I believe there were some examples of various values in that video from Cassie, but those are not the only values. So we can also think about other things that our community cares about that we can lead with. And then making sure that as we are explaining the science behind what we are talking about, that we use an explanatory chain to walk our listeners from point A to point B to point C. Because for many of us to say that driving our car causes climate change, we understand all the mechanisms that happen in those in-between steps, but we cannot make assumptions that whoever we are talking to understands how we got from A to D, and that using metaphors can be really helpful to help our audiences better understand what it is we're talking about, such as the heat trapping blanket is very easy for people to get a hold on what we're talking about. And then making sure that we finish any bit of discussion with solutions, particularly community level solutions. So that way we leave our listeners and our community members with a feeling of hope, as opposed to the whole world's coming to an end and we may as well just lay down and give up now, because that is not how we want anyone to walk away feeling. So yeah, so I was very excited to share that with everyone. And I do trainings related to that as well. And the course I teach at UF is all based on that work. And I've been working with that organization for over a decade now. So if anybody had any questions that you'd like some clarification or a little more information about any of those pieces, I'm happy to take any of those questions.
Megan, maybe as a maybe an exercise, we could take at some time, it doesn't have to be this meeting, but we could take a measure, a climate change measure, and go through it. Maybe it would be one on energy conservation, home energy conservation, and kind of go through that. I think that makes a lot of sense, and explaining especially peak conditions and things like that on the electric grid, and also the conservation. from the air conditioning side to tying the home into it and how everything connects together. It might be interesting to go take a measure and actually go through that framing process.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I think we should absolutely look into where we can put that into the into our schedule at some point. And Stacy, I hadn't included it, but Forrest and I had also talked about putting or doing this presentation for some of the staff as well. So we're happy to just share that video with the staff rather than trying to find a time where everybody can come together, knowing how busy everyone is. And just for those of you who have the access to the video, that was for your use and your knowledge, and we ask that you please don't share it broadly. The organization does a lot of trainings and things like that, but that video was specifically for you all and Ellen's class. So we were lucky that that had already been put together.
Megan, when would you like to do that for staff? And I would imagine we would maybe do it as a webinar, and maybe we even could do it, you know, kind of bill it as something like a lunch and learn. And,
Sure.
you know, it could be open to, you know, could even be open to all city, county, GRU staff, or it could be a more targeted group depending on what you're trying to go for with it.
Yeah, and I'm happy we can have that discussion via email so we don't take everyone else's time up. But the alternative is Cassie and I are happy for that video to be shared with the city and county folks as well, if that's easier than trying to schedule a lunch and learn, which either way is completely fine for me. But we can do that via email.
Great.
Great. And just to throw it out there that if anybody really loved the video and want to know more, we will be having a full training this fall. I think it'll be 6 weeks of in-depth coaching and things like that. So I'm happy to share that information once we have dates and costs set, if anybody wants to really dig into it. Great. So for this section, we also have some information about communication plan examples. Stacy, do you have those, or did Megan have those? Or Christine, did you have them?
Or Hannah.
Hannah.
Yeah, I did not. Sorry. I prepared a document with examples and ideas for us to discuss.
Great. Have you shared that with everyone? Is it in the drive, or do you want to share it into the chat?
Right, just a second. So no, I haven't shared it yet. My idea for what I was going to do tonight was kind of go over what I've drafted thus far, get some feedback, and then kind of make some edits to it, and then put it in the drive for us.
Great. That sounds wonderful. If you want to take it away.
Okay. All right, cool. Thanks. Sorry, I've got to figure out how to share the screen really quickly. Okay. I might have to restart Zoom, sorry, to be able to share the screen. So
here, let me make you a co-host and see if that does it, Hannah.
Okay. It might be the security settings on my computer, but if you want to try that first, that would be great.
Here, try that. See if that works.
Okay. Oh, awesome. Okay. Is that working for everyone? Great. Okay. So this is the document I'm going to be talking about today. Really, my idea for it was to kind of fill in some things on Christine's original document. So this is what she presented on like our April 8th meeting. And so she went over, this process of identifying stakeholders, the goals of stakeholder engagement, outcomes, our promise to stakeholders, stakeholder outreach strategy, and the activities and timeline. So I'm going to be focusing more so on the on the last two. And so I've kind of gathered together some ideas of, more or less kind of creative ways that we can to kind of deeply draw in the community in a sustained fashion throughout the more or less like the initial stages of the planning and drafting process. And so, sorry, here, this is actually my draft one. Hold on just a second. Oh no, this is perfect, yeah. So my question is, how do we design a community engagement plan that reflects our goal of centering equity and justice in the climate action planning process? And so I'm kind of choosing to not use the word communications plan, just because I kind of like the more active verbs of, engaging, engaging, involving, collaborating, empowering, kind of a, more of a partnership than a kind of one-way information stream. And so there's this one really, really great document I found, and it was a collaborative document by these planners, the National Association of Climate Resilience Planners, and it has this kind of wealth of information, lots of ideas about what they're calling community-driven climate planning. And so we've got like these 5 principles to it. Really, and I'm sorry, I think my internet is going in and out a little bit, but yeah, so I'm really going to focus on like the first 2, how we can kind of use certain methodologies and types of kind of community events and activities to establish these first 2 goals. So improving our infrastructure for community participation in decision making, and authentic and equitable partnerships between local government and community-based organizations. And these are the other few goals that they're trying to hit at. So very quickly, this is like my very raw sketch of like what the action plan development is going to look like from this point forward. And so we've talked about in the communications planning that we really want to have a step where we take the time to speak to residents, identify their concerns, what they feel they're most vulnerable to, and then their kind of priorities as well. With regards to, again, climate impacts, but again, that can, cover a wide range of things like food security, energy security. Can I, afford to turn on my AC in the middle of a heat wave? What am I going to do if the power goes out, et cetera. And then kind of a second step to that process I added also is kind of encouraging this collaborative process of articulating community-based definitions of resilience. And I really like this idea because I think that something that's really important in what we hope to do in our kind of community engagement planning is to really kind of facilitate our community's capacity to really envision what they want their future to look like. And to be aware, right, of the vulnerabilities, of the risks that they're facing, and to, really use the creativity that they already have to, envision how they might adapt to those, adapt and respond to these kinds of crises and emergencies that we're going to face, we already do face. So we've got that kind of as the first bit. Second bit, then we will, after we listen to this, after we facilitate these kinds of encounters, we will then, we being, CCAC/staff and all the other involved parties, draft a text that describes community-based resilience, community concerns and vulnerabilities, this process of receiving feedback and revising, right? Like a nice cycle there. And then similarly, another little loop here, drafting policies and proposed solutions that address the community input, responding to those priorities, to their concerns, and throughout that process, seeking out and utilizing community-based organization knowledge and expertise when drafting those policies. Because obviously, we have an amazing, team at the CCAC and obviously with staff, but we also want to be involving all of these organizations that are already doing so much, great work on the ground on housing, on food security, et cetera. And really, taking advantage of that knowledge and making sure that they're kind of co-producing that in a sense with us, or that could be at least a goal. So yeah, and getting that feedback, receiving feedback, revise, and then probably some other stuff in there, but then eventually publication. So now I'm going to get into some of the kind of fun kind of methods, activities that we can use to sort of accomplish these aims. So I've got a few ideas. I'll just kind of go through them quickly. So one would be a form of participatory research. So we could do semi-structured focus groups in the form of like outdoor resident conversations where we provide food, 15 to 30 residents. Trying to target and focus our outreach on sort of those frontline communities, those that are going to be most vulnerable to climate impacts and already are. But at the same time, wanting to make sure that we do get in those conversations around Gainesville. And I was thinking, somewhere in the area of like 6 to 10 in the city, and then 4 to 8 outside of Gainesville. So like at these events, we could do something along the lines of give a brief introduction to what the climate action plan is, explain that we're there to understand their priorities, their concerns, and importantly as well, identifying barriers to participation in the process, because sometimes we don't fully understand what those are. And so it's good to really, understand that. So, and then my idea was kind of, 4-ish CCAC members / staff. I don't know how that works with the Florida sunshine laws, but something to figure out. And we honestly just, walk around, converse with people, ask them kind of like a structured kind of set of questions, with semi-structured kind of open-ended questions, along the lines of having to do with food security. What is working for you right now in terms of making sure that you're food secure, and what is not? Are community gardens helping? Do you want more community gardens? Or do you want a community-owned grocery store? In terms of like heat vulnerability, can you afford to run AC when it's necessary? Do you have access to pools? Can you afford the entry cost? Again, thinking of the kind of crisis of a heat wave. Air pollution, sort of what community services do you take advantage of in Gainesville already? Would like to see more of? How do you get around the city? What works for you about your transit, and what would you change? That's like a lot of stuff. Obviously, we can cut it down to a few questions, but just as an entry point, really, to kind of getting that sort of feedback from the residents. Another tool, definitely online participatory platforms to engage digitally with the residents. And so, along the lines of Granicus, Google Forms, Google Docs. So I thought that, of course, like survey tools could be really useful during this initial stage of gathering their concerns, vulnerabilities, priorities. And then Google Docs. I know Austin, Texas did this in their action plan. So they would they post it publicly online, and then they allowed the public to comment on it. And it, in my opinion, it looked really nice. It seemed to get a lot of engagement. And I think it's something we could consider. As long as CCAC wasn't all, editing it at the same time, if it was kind of staff that was running that process, I think we would be okay with Sunshine. So another idea are scenario games. So this is something that's used in terms of risk planning, things like that. So facilitators pose series of climate related emergencies, and the participants work together to really figure out how they would respond. What would need to be developed in order to build resilience if, we had a week long, or we had a week of wet bulb temperatures, if, we lost power for weeks at a time, if there were supply chain disruptions to food supply, and we didn't have access to, Publix or wards, and things like that. And that really kind of helps people again, take ownership of this creativity that they already have, and really make them feel quite involved as well in this process. Then there's creative town halls. So using storytelling, art, theater in order to collaboratively define resilience and our desired futures. So I think Jennison a while back, I think you brought up this idea of like partnering with some local arts groups. And I still think that's a really cool idea. And I think it's something that we could and should look into. And so like, yeah, the creative town halls and the intergenerational and well, the visioning exercises like public art murals and things like that, I think would be really cool things to do if we were able to partner with some arts groups. And then in terms of kind of, yeah, building those partnerships between our local governments and those community-based organizations with that knowledge, with that expertise. I'm not really sure. This is just kind of my stab at thinking about how we could potentially start to build those partnerships. It's kind of what we've discussed in the past, right? Like identifying someone within these organizations who could act as a kind of liaison and loop them into these conversations with staff and CCAC as they're drafting policies for those kind of relevant, issue areas that the organization works on. So yeah, I would really love to hear your ideas as well about how we can start to bring those organizations in, because I know I feel like we've been quite slow on that. It's no one's fault, but I'd really like to see a lot more of that pretty soon, because I definitely think it's time to bring those organizations in. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So like right now, yeah, I would love to hear, any thoughts and questions. These were just some that I was like hoping to hear your thoughts on. Basically, what do you have to add to this? What do you think about what I've said? And then especially, I'd really love to hear people's thoughts on this as well. Like, how do we make it even more accessible? Do we think that like a Google Docs idea could work? Do we think that this idea of like community-based organization liaisons could work in terms of really getting a lot more people involved? So yeah, I'll end it there. Thank you guys.
Thanks, Hannah. That was really very thorough and well thought out. I appreciate you taking the time to put that together. One thing I was thinking about as you were going through that was for your first recommendation of community meetings where we have food. I think it's very important that we make them family oriented, because there are a lot of community members that wouldn't necessarily be able to engage if they weren't able to bring their family. So we'd want to plan to be able to feed families as opposed to individuals, so that we're making sure we're meeting everyone and addressing the need broadly and not just for the individuals. So that was one thing that just popped up for me that I'd like to add to what you had put together already. Amanda. Mm-hmm.
Also, I think, Hannah, I think that was very thorough, and I think we definitely have touched on pretty much all the areas, and it's just a matter of filling them in. I think that we should also make them as neighborhood oriented as we can, and in terms of maybe even things like churches or community centers, and therefore we can tailor it to that particular neighborhood and in terms of the kinds of things they might be interested in.
Yeah, I was gonna say something very similar, John. I think that was great, Hannah. I like the idea of focus groups. Like if we have specific groups of people, like for instance, if we wanted to have a group of homeowners or renters or small businesses. And I think if those are set up, possibly beforehand, we could see if we could go to them somehow. So sometimes if you take the information to the group and present something really short and tell them that there's a focus groups coming up, we want you guys to come to us for more in-depth. That wouldn't make it 100% that we'll rely on them coming to us. So I think we should go to them, to their neighborhood groups or their organizations if we know a focus group is coming up, give them a little snippet of what we're going to talk about and then invite them to come to our focus groups.
Christine.
Yeah, I'm saying similar stuff. Hannah, that was great. I appreciate that what you put into that and how you thought through it. With what John and Amanda were saying, I completely agree. And I think that if people feel like they have, there's some reason for them to attend these meetings, and they will definitely show up. I think that we'll probably find that there are some folks that are going to show up no matter what to these meetings, but we need to be able to also seek out some of the folks that we really need input from. And so going to them and finding where they're meeting, where they're getting together. There's a variety of I'm sure, community groups, business groups, et cetera, that we can hopefully get engaged with and then asked to go present at whatever they have. Maybe it's a neighborhood meeting that's going on. Maybe it's a business meeting, the hospitality council. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different groups, the Chamber of Commerce, et cetera, that meet regularly anyway. And if we can figure out where those are and where those neighborhood meetings are, and John, I'm completely in agreement with you with the churches. I think that's going to be a huge, great resource for us. So if we can find places that we can go and present brief snippets or ask for, to have a little bit of time to do an engagement process, that would be great.
I think it would also be interesting, sorry, going off of what John had said, to see if some of those community leaders would be interested in help co-facilitating the meetings. So it doesn't look like we're coming in and saying, hey, here's what we're doing this evening, because it would help bring those groups into the CCAC more and have them feel like they have a buy-in and a voice, but may hopefully make the meetings a little more productive. And I think I threw this out at one point many moons ago, but one of the museums I was meeting with, talking about how they engaged with families during COVID, was they sent out materials at the food bank and put in flyers and things where people were picking up food for their family. And that may be an interesting way to think about reaching some people who might not be able to join us for meetings or things like that, that we could share some of our information about what we're doing and some ways to connect with us, that even if we can't get to them or they can't get to us, that perhaps there are opportunities for them to meet with us virtually or through the Google Docs or things like that. So I'm sure there are all sorts of creative ways to connect with communities, even if they don't have the time to sit in the meetings with us. John and Stacy, and then Christine.
Real quick, I was just going to say, I think that the way we package the tone of our meeting, it definitely makes a difference. And I think making it a solution-based platform, we're here to solve this problem, and we'd like to get your input for this solution. That would bring people in. I think the way we actually position the meeting as a solution-based meeting.
Thanks, John. Stacy, I think you were next.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious if the thought is getting feedback like now, kind of like before things are starting to be written, or if you're thinking for afterwards, once there's kind of some policy ideas and direction, or both. So that's one question I have. And then the other thing is, I think churches are a great idea. They're hard unless you have contact, unless you have an in. We reached out years ago to try to do water programming at churches, and sent the letter and offered to like come to their groups and stuff, and no one responded. So I mean, it would take a network. Like some of these groups, they're very protective. So you might have to like reach out to friends in your networks to have an in somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah, I can answer that question really quick, Stacey, at least in terms of what I was thinking. So in terms of like, yeah, these focus groups, I mean, I like calling them resident conversations or like community conversations a little bit better. It's a little less formal. I was kind of envisioning starting that process like right now, essentially. I think it's better to start talking to people before we get quite far into the process of like thinking through or like, yeah, of devising policy solutions, because my intent with this, what I was trying to get at was that I think we want to try as best we can to really help the community feel like they're not just being like listened to, and they're not just, you know, giving their feedback on proposed kind of policies, but they're really able to propose things themselves. And so like the very first step of that is listening to them and understanding what we even need to solve in the first place. Because yeah, like us as like, you know, a group of, you know, like of local government staff and planners and you know, experts on this and that sector, we have a lot of information and knowledge about climate change and its impacts, but we don't all understand how it impacts people of like different, you know, economic sectors and lifestyles. And yeah, basically, so yeah, I would like it to start with right now and with the people and asking them their concerns, their priorities, what works, what doesn't. And I do hear you though, John, in that like it would be good to begin by making it solutions based.
And
I get, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
let me qualify that. What I was saying, Hannah, everybody doesn't start on the same information level. So what I was thinking was to frame this after educating or informing to a certain level, and then getting feedback from the information that was given. Just so that we have a background, because as we were talking about this framing, we want to make sure that all the that people understand how things are connected, and then once we do that, they can make that connection to their lifestyle, and then we can make it more like a solution based. Once we have a foundation of information, of connecting things, not, you know, in scenarios. I like examples and scenarios to people's lives, and I think that's a good way to, you know, the Bible uses a lot of those scenarios, and I think that you can do that with people in their community and in their lifestyle. Here's how it would affect you. And then once you do that, you framed it to a solution-based conversation.
And sorry, Jenison, John, to touch to that, and yes, Christine, I'm sorry, I know you're next. One of the initial values that we started with our research was innovation, and it talked about how US and American people are all about innovation and solving problems, and that is a value I still use very frequently because it resonates with people a lot.
Start with a problem.
Yeah, in the research, they've streamlined from, like, we initially had 10 different values you can use, and now they have protection and responsible management, and innovation falls in there somewhere. But that is absolutely one that when I first started learning how to do all of this, you know, connecting with people as we are problem solvers and we are able to figure out creative solutions, and that we can come up with solutions for these issues. So thank you for focusing on that again. And I'm sorry, Christine, you have had your hand up for a while if you'd like to go next.
Thank you. Yeah, Hannah, I agree with you that this should start right now. And also, John, I'm with you on that. I think that terminology is going to be really important. We need to be using words and terms people. And so, whereas we understand what we want, what we see needs to be done, and we understand how we think we should frame it, I think that there are people in all different areas of the community in all different walks of life that think differently, and we need to make sure that whatever we're discussing resonates with them. And so it's the so what. That's what I get back to. So what? Why does this matter? So what? So whenever we're doing these things, it's that so what is going to make it so that people want to even have this conversation. So what's the terminology? What's the framing? What's this backstory? And what's the education that's needed to get everybody to be able to discuss this and discuss their needs?
Thanks, Christine. Jennison, you were next, and then Hannah.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Hannah, for that wonderful synthesis of what it's already been almost a year we've been talking about these things. And I would definitely second or third or fourth that we need to start these conversations like yesterday if we can, or try to move a little bit faster in that direction. And I keep thinking about the protection idea, as well as how diverse and geographically, this is a big community we're trying to represent in the climate action plan. And so I think that coming back to the idea of inviting in, essentially putting out a call for these community partner liaisons who are the connections to, or who are already sort of the ambassadors to these different communities that we're not personally connected to as members of this committee. And then doing just a whole lot of really genuine listening and invitations of, what is it that you value, that you want to make sure is protected in our community for us, not just for me, like, the whole framing. And so rather than saying that's connected to climate change in this way, first start with, well, what is it that that the residents of this community 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now want to preserve and protect, for future generations. And I think some of the colleagues I've worked with at the university through extension in more rural areas in the state have done this real creatively with art, through an artistic lens, as simple as hosting like, a social event at a church or something that's already happening, but going to the church. And then one colleague of mine in Columbia County did this, where she took pictures of residents when they were coming to this event and said, what do you love about our community? And then they like wrote it on a whiteboard, and they took pictures. And what do you I forget what the framing question was, but basically, what would you like to see change, or what could be better? And then just, she printed out these photos and put them side by side, and you saw like grandkids with their grandparents, and it just like starts really opening up and helping this, those of us who are trying to help guide the decision making or make recommendations to the commissioners. It helps us really truly understand genuinely where those values lie. And I think it's in line with that principle of, moving slow to move fast. It'll be hard, I think, to do that genuine listening and not leap to, well, here's what we need to do to get there, to protect those things. But another way, I know a colleague in Northeast Florida has been hosting for years, like conversations with farmers. They're just breakfasts, like once a week or once every other week with farmers on a Saturday, where they often convene, and it's just come have breakfast and let's talk about what's going on in our community. And, it's not a subversive thing. It's to really try to build that community and build that ownership also. So I think there's a lot of great ideas out there, and I'm looking forward to hearing what our others on the call and others who've been tuning into these meetings with their ideas are. But
Thank you, Jennison. Hannah, I think we're to you now.
Thanks. Jennison, I thought you just put that really beautifully. Thank you so much. I love the way that you framed that in terms of like genuine listening and kind of like building that trust as well. And that project too that you're describing, of the photos and, you know, asking people what they love, what they want to preserve, and what could be changed. I really like that framing. And that's kind of like, yeah, the intent I would like to see as we're starting off in a sense. And then I really quickly just wanted to like address a few other things that other people have brought up. So one was, I think Stacy, you mentioned churches and how it definitely can be quite hard, but very rewarding. I absolutely agree. And I think we have all kind of had a discussion on here like a few times about churches and kind of which ones we're each connected to. And I know we like, there were a fair amount of churches I felt like we did have kind of personal connections to. And so it could be time to start, you know, utilizing those, or just saying like, I think we can utilize those. And then another one, I don't remember who said this, it might've been John. I really like the idea of this kind of co-facilitating the meeting with, you know, a leader from the organization or from the neighborhood or the community. That's a really good idea, as well as kind of just trying to find an ongoing meeting and then seeing if we can kind of add to that at the very end. That's really smart. And then the last thing I was going to add to is kind of with that adding on to meetings. If we were to use some sort of Google form in terms of getting more survey responses at any point in the process, you know, I think we could, you know, after kind of establishing some sort of partnership or relationship with one of those, with someone in those organizations, you know, we can potentially ask them to send that out along with, you know, emails on their mailing list. So that's worked for me on like some other campaigns I've worked on, just to get a bit more online engagement. That's it.
Thanks, Hannah. And Bob had a question that Stacy or Lily, I don't know if you could answer, about when the vulnerability study will be completed.
I think it was at least a year, I think, but I'd have to look back. You know what? Let me look while you guys are talking because I have that proposal.
Okay.
And I'm not sure, I see the follow-up question. Could this process be part of that study? I think that we could build in some stakeholder outreach. I don't know if to the level that you're talking about here, but there could be a way to build off of it. But let me look at that proposal. I think it had a timeline in it.
Great. Stacy, while you're doing that, I'm going to share my screen again. So as I said, I teach about this in my class, and I realized I had a very short 4-slide PowerPoint about other values that may be of interest for all of you. And so innovation was that first one that I was talking about, you know, that we really think of ourselves as people who are problem solvers and able to really address these issues. Another one of the older values that really ties in well to a lot of our conversation tonight is stewardship, as this is a value that tends to resonate with our religious communities, since this is very foundational for a lot of those organizations. So talking about climate change and how it is a responsibility of us as stewards of the planet to care for it and protect it for the future. Interconnectedness is my favorite value because you can use it for anything. It's basically the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon value, and talking about how everything connects. So when I used to teach about sharks, I'd ask people who like to eat seafood and tell them they needed to think a shark for their seafood dinner. And then we'd talk about food chains and all of that and how sharks do protect some of our seafood that we like to eat. If you want to know more, I'll give you the full explanatory chain at another time. But interconnectedness is super easy. I love this one for almost everything. And then the last one that ties into what Jennison was talking about is legacy. And, you know, what do we want to leave for our children and our grandchildren, and connecting, you know, what is the legacy that you want to leave related to protecting the environment for and addressing climate change issues. So those were just a few of the other values that were initially part of the research, but then kind of got rolled into protection and responsible management. So we are coming up on 7 o'clock. Does anyone have any other questions about what Hannah shared, or anything else related to the communications plan?
This is Christine. One of the things that we had talked about initially when we were first discussing all of these things was the idea of getting a PR group involved. And I saw the chat come up about the College of Journalism and Communications. Is that something we could still consider for outreach and for getting people involved?
I think so. In the proposed budget for next fiscal year, there is some funding that could be used for climate initiatives. I believe it was 50,000 in the proposed budget. That won't be finalized until the end of September. I don't think, I mean, since it's not a huge pot of money, I don't think it'll get taken out, but we will see. But if it goes through, that wouldn't be available until October.
Hannah?
Okay. I was going to ask if that money could be used for providing food and or childcare at any of like our focus groups or community conversations, but if it's not available until October, probably.
So, I mean, if something came together before October, depending on what we're talking about, I mean, I have a little bit of budget within the water resources group that could potentially be used to, you know, get some pizzas or something like that. I think childcare would just be more, I don't think we could do that just because of liability issues. But getting food, and we could probably have, you know, if you were like doing your own event, we could definitely bring some, we have kid games like water stuff. We could bring some staff that could help entertain the kids while you're talking to the parents. Anything that we're doing that I think multiple of you will be there would have to be a publicly noticed meeting, but we'd have to look into that. I mean, I guess someone would have to record minutes to some degree. You know, there's some logistics there, but I mean, so it might be easier to have your own meeting because then you can have some control over those things as far as sunshine. But you could have your own meeting, you know, if it's at a church, it's after the service and we're just noticing it, that it's, you know, in the fellowship hall or things like that. So I think that we can find ways to get out into the community. And if we're not talking, you know, thousands of dollars, if we're talking hundreds of dollars for an event, I can help.
Are we able to, sorry, I'm jumping in, but are we able to have a location host something? So if there is, say, a popular restaurant, gathering place, whatever, would that be able to be a host for a meeting and say, come get barbecue and we're going to have a conversation? Would that work?
I would have to
Pizza,
check that. I mean, I
think like places, barbecue place, you know, any of the places that people love to go.
yeah, I mean, we just have to be true. I mean, it would be publicly noticed. So, you know, are you gonna overwhelm the place? Like, I don't know that you can turn people away, but also how many people look at our posting of meetings on the county website.
I guess that's where I was going with it, was if there's a popular place in an area of the community that we want to go into, if they were hosting and they announced it, would that be something we could do? And that would bring in their groups that come to their place.
I would think so. I mean, it just has to be publicly also like on the county's website. If there's going to be multiple of you there, I mean, if only one of you's there, then I think it's not a CCAC meeting.
John, were you going to suggest a specific? Because go ahead first.
I think that one of the common ways to do something like that would be at a church dining hall for a particular group. And then you kind of have people of the same mindset kind of working together. And also, I would wonder, Stacy, if we could get some kind of pamphlets or handout that we could give to people that would kind of outline what the meeting was about and what we wanted them to leave there with. People, you know, we always need to have something that a message that they can take with them. And if dollars could be arranged so that we could put something like that together.
Printing's easy, design is expensive.
Well, and kind of tagging onto that, I'm thinking about, you know, the like intercept survey methods and how, you know, we want to meet people where they are. And because even though we're almost a year now since this committee's been established, a lot of people still have no idea that this effort and initiative exists. And like, I'm thinking about Touch a Truck, you know, like, could we table with one of us, not more than one of us, but like we could, you know, go to different events where the community knows every year, like Sweet Dreams Chocolate Night, like, you know what I mean? Just like get out there and just with postcards or something. And I think a critical component that could help us move that faster is having, like Hannah said, either whether it's a Google Doc or some way, some real-time mechanism for people to share feedback at any time, you know, when after they've had a conversation with a neighbor or at the church or something, and they have ideas that they want to give back, like open up that two-way dialogue in as many in as many ways as we possibly can.
Thanks, Jennison. Hannah, you are next.
Thanks. I mean, I'm happy to, like going off of what everyone's talked about today, taking that into account. I can try to draft something, a brochure, pamphlet. I can design things too. I'll do it for free. And, you know, put it in the drive, see what people think. And if you want to do something more professional, you're welcome to do that. But I don't think it needs to be like super jazzy or anything. Like it can be, you know, I don't think we need like a professional PR firm to draft like a brochure for it, probably. If it's just trying to, you know, get people to understand what it is and get them a bit more information, get them like an online link to stay engaged, involved, like I think it would be pretty simple. So I'd be happy to do that. And then secondly, for the Google Docs, I would definitely recommend, I'm going to try to find the link to the Austin, Texas Google Docs, or like how they've arranged that, because I think it's really cool. And if you guys can like take a second and check it out, might be of interest.
That sounds great, Hannah. So I think a good next step here would be that if people have specific locations that we should start considering for meeting at, or sending a singular body to be, if you will send those to either Stacy or Forrest, so we can start collating all of those in one place, as well as any community organizations that we need to start building relationships with. I saw a number of them in the chat, including the Thompson Earth Systems Institute. I dropped that in there. If you're not familiar, our institute's mission is to communicate science to the public. So we are still fairly young, only 2 years old, 3 years old now at this point. But so I think all of us have really wonderful networks of organizations and people that we need to include. So we will put that on our homework for this week to start sending locations that we'd like to start meeting with our community and community organizations that we want to start building relationships with. Stacy?
sorry to be commandeering your meeting. Would it be helpful at this time to also start drafting, what do you want to ask people? Like, what do you want to learn so that, you know, if some events do come up, I mean, the summer doesn't tend to have a ton of events. But as things come up, so that, you know, if there's kind of your focus group guide, your questions, that then someone could jump on it and go to an event and start collecting some data.
I think that's great. So we'll add that to our homework as well. Hannah, did you have another comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, if you guys are able to think about that in like the next week or two and send that out to Stacy or Forrest, and then if they can send that collected to me maybe, or put it in the drive, something like that, I can try to then draft said brochure / pamphlet or whatever, and then get feedback on that, just so we're moving pretty quickly and I'm not like waiting until the next meeting to start drafting that. Well, actually, I mean, I guess if it's just the questions, we don't really need to have that specifically in the brochure. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think we may not need them in the brochure, but sending them now as we're thinking about them is probably great, because we don't want to forget as things are fresh in our mind. Awesome. So one more opportunity for any other comments related to the communications plan. All right. I have 7:08. Would a break until 7:15 give people enough time, or would you like to do until 7:18?
7:15 works for me.
Perfect. All right. Well, let's take a quick break and we'll meet back at 7:15. Thanks, everybody. All right, I have 7:16. So if everybody is back, we'll get started. On our next very exciting agenda item. Stacy, I have put the draft vision statement and mission statement in a Word document. Is it okay for me to share that and for me to take notes and make changes and then send it back to you in Forrest?
That'd be
Okay.
great.
Great. I just wanted to make sure we don't, that is okay with all the sunshine and all of that stuff.
Yeah, we're in a
Okay.
publicly noticed meeting right now, so it should be fine. And I don't want anyone to feel pigeonholed into the start that staff made. It just came up in a meeting, and sometimes it's easier to start with something to edit rather than start from scratch. So please don't feel confined by it.
No, and thank you for sending that, because I think we did decide in our last meeting that having a starting point was going to be easier than all of us trying to come up with something. So can everybody see the draft vision and mission statements? Great. So the draft vision statement is to guide Alachua County and its local governments partners as we create an environmentally, socially, and economically resilient community by developing equitable solutions to climate change. So we'll start with that one before we get into the mission statement. Does anyone have any thoughts or comments or suggestions? Sorry, Stacy, go ahead.
Will you just make the font bigger?
I can absolutely do that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Or your screen blowing up. Yeah.
There we go. Sorry, thank you, Jennison. I have things on too many screens, so it's hard to catch everything sometimes. Can make it a little bit bigger. Would anybody like to start? Oops, that's not what I meant to do. Well, the first thing I noticed, should it be governments and partners or government partners?
Can I back up one step and
Please.
ask a question?
Yeah.
Or just to make sure we're on the same page. So the vision is what we're trying to get to, right? And then the mission is how we get there, right? So that's what we ultimately want these two to reflect, like the what and how. Is that, I know these two can often be like, you know, folded into one thing. And so I just want to make sure we're on the same page with that.
And my question is this the vision? This is the vision and mission for the climate action plan or for the CCAC?
Stacy, do you have any insight on that? Were we trying to make it for the action plan or for us as a board?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I don't know what would be more useful. I mean, I would think the climate action plan, you know, would have this language in it, regardless of whether it was, you know, the vision of the group or the plan. So I think maybe whatever seems most relevant to you as a group.
Hannah?
Yeah, so two things. I would say it would be more appropriate to have it be the climate action plan vision and mission statement personally. Trying to like articulate why. I guess I just feel like we're only like one kind of advisory board, and out of like, and there's going to be a lot of different organizations and groups kind of involved in the process. So, and plus like, I mean, this is like the vision statement that's going to be in the plan. And I don't know, I think it makes more sense for it to be for the climate action plan. That's my vote at least. And then secondly, I would say it sounds, the language of like, as we create a community, it just like sounds a bit strange to me. I'm trying to think through what verb I might use instead of create, but it's not that we're creating a community, like we already have a community. And so I don't know, I'm not loving the create verb, but I'm trying to think of alternatives, sorry.
I have a question about the beginning, to get Alachua County. We need more specifics there, and its local government partners. Is Alachua County government what, and partners, to get Alachua County government and partners, or the Alachua County by itself just doesn't seem like it's descriptive enough.
Yeah, and I was thinking the same, John, that like it's really our community, but
Right.
what we're defining as our community in this case is the county, all and all residents within the county and municipalities, right? I mean, it's so. I agree, it's helpful to be very clear with that.
Okay.
So I think, Hannah, to your point, are we creating strategies for our communities, or are we trying to have the community be environmentally, socially, and economically resilient?
Yeah, I feel like we're not, what did you just say? Building strategies or like creating strategies? Yeah, it's not so much that we are creating strategies, right? Like our idea, like we were just talking about, is that we want to like facilitate the process of like co-creating strategies. Yeah. And then, okay, so then the other thing I would say too is like creating resilient strategies. I mean, personally, I love the language of like building resilience, building a more resilient community that can respond to climate change. Oh, sorry, respond to climate change impacts. But yeah, the create strategies doesn't sound right to me, but it's better. It's better than creating a community. I do like that better for sure.
And I think about like fostering, empowering, enabling, or not enabling, that doesn't sound right, but like fostering, cultivating, and empowering, that it's we're not the ones with the answers, but that we're doing this together. And we're trying to invest. And a critical piece to me that I think personally, I think should be reflected in the vision, or maybe it's actually in the mission, is that we're not just trying to put together a plan, we're trying to make sure that plan results in action that gets us to this ideal outcome where our community is environmentally, socially, and economically strong and resilient. And just to throw it out there while we're talking, like I think there's this, the goal or the vision ultimately is not just for us to be able to support life and our natural, and the life support systems we need to survive, but a quality of life. So it's like, it's not good enough just to survive, but we want to like cultivate that quality of life for everybody in an equitable way. Very
Hannah, do you still have a
ambitious.
question? Yeah. Christine, are you unmuted? Sorry, sharing my screen, it's harder to see everybody.
I didn't really, I was just listening, and some of the words that I was writing down was responsive. We need to respond. And I also wrote acting on climate change. And I don't think that's the right way to say it, but it's action and response, actionable goals, timeline, strategies. And I do think we need to step back and decide if this is for the CCAC or the CAP.
What was your thought on that?
I feel like we've been in this for a year, that we should know what we're doing. I think this should be for the CAP.
Okay. So that was 2 people for the plan. Does the rest of the group agree that we are focusing on this for the plan rather than the board?
I agree.
Okay.
I think we talked about in the past what our role was. It was to advise directly the commission, county and city commissioners. So we kind of know what ours is in terms of putting together this plan and reviewing the plan. But I think that this needs to, we're kind of talking about the plan itself. What is the plan, the vision of the plan? I create, to me, I like more action. I like maybe develop environmental. I like maybe develop or foster, or more action oriented word right there. And I think if we take the word partners as we, and just put a word like to foster, to develop, and take the word we out of it, because I don't know who we is right now.
I think it's a framework that we want to, that whoever the we is, the framework that's being made to, within which people can, it's a framework. I think framework is just the word that keeps resonating with me. It's the guidelines, it's a sideboard, it's all the things that policies, procedures, actionable items, et cetera, fall within.
Thanks, Christine. Hannah?
Thanks. Sorry, what was I going to say? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm absolutely jumping ahead, but I was just looking at the mission statement, and I'm just really confused about why there's a vision statement and a mission statement and how they differ and why we need both. And I was curious if someone could really quickly address that.
Ellen put a lovely comment about it in the chat, that the vision statement focuses on tomorrow and what an organization wants to ultimately become, whereas a mission statement focuses on today and what an organization does to achieve it. Both are vital in directing goals. The vision statement focuses on tomorrow, and the mission statement is more for today.
So, but we're thinking that potentially this is going to be a vision statement for the climate action plan though, right? And not the CCAC. So and that was a really excellent explanation, Ellen. Thank you so much. I'm just curious if we did go with this being for the CAP, would we keep a mission statement if it's like a mission statement that focuses on tomorrow, or a vision statement? Oh wait, sorry. Mission statement focuses on today.
Jenison?
I don't know, sorry.
No, it's an, I totally see where you're coming from. And I think to me, the way I distinguish the two, and I think it is important to have both, is that we as a community and a committee, it's like we need to have a very clear picture of where we're trying to get to, like what's the outcome we're trying to achieve. And that's the vision, right? So this is the future we're trying to create essentially together. And then the mission statement is kind of the rules of the road about how we get there. And that's very more process oriented. So I think about things like being transparent, accountable, inclusive, equitable, like, you know, what are those core values that guide like how this plan is developed and implemented as we move toward or try to reach that future. Along the way, it's kind of like that commitment to each other. And I think it's really important in any kind of process like this, but especially around climate that can be so divisive, you know, that we're very honest and transparent in how we do everything. Did that help at all, Hannah? Or did that just make it fuzzier?
No. I mean, yeah, it's a little bit fuzzy. I'm not used to the like NGO kind of speak, if that, I think it's like a bit of nonprofit kind of language, and that's cool. Like it's just like it's a little bit newer for me. But I like the way that you put that, and I think I can see the value of it a little bit better now. So thank you.
When I read the vision statement, it actually is the same thing that was the mission. It's the objective of CCAC group. That's what our objective is. And I guess it could be the same thing. Our objective as a group should be the vision of the plan. So when we obtain our objective, and when we do our mission, what we're assigned, we should accomplish this vision.
Stacy, is there anybody in the county who guides these kinds of processes? Because we've been going through this with the Thompson Earth Systems Institute, and we've been working with 2 facilitators at the university whose entire job is to help organizations design these kinds of things. So I was just curious whether there is someone on staff who may be well versed in facilitating this kind of conversation.
Not that I'm aware of. And I'm not sure if any other staff on here knows of such resources.
I am not aware of such resources.
No, well, I'm not aware of those resources either.
I guess I always struggle with this phase because I think it's important to have a good vision and a good mission, because you can come back to it if you start to stray. Okay, what is our mission? But I also think it's something you can get caught up in and spend a lot of time when really the goal, I think, is, are we straying? What are we doing here? So for me, it's kind of a touchstone when, do I want to spend time on this? Okay, does it meet my vision or mission? No. Okay.
That's a really good point, Stacy. I think it's a mechanism for us if we're going down rabbit holes or going like you come back and say, is this in line? Are we focused on the vision, or are we aiming towards something else that's not our, commitment? And back in February, I went through this process with a national group of extension climate initiative folks. So like hundreds of people chiming in, and we just did that. We said, this is a living thing. Let's, invite input, define it where we see it today. And if we need to come back to it, we'll revise it but we don't want to get hung up on it and keep it from moving us toward action. So I think maybe I like, Megan, how you're collecting all of our thoughts now. Like maybe we hammer out, and have everybody on the call tonight in this workshop, like provide your thoughts, and we could come back to it, and with a revised draft, and then make a decision about whether everyone's okay with it, a consensus building, or consensus based process for like, is that, is the entire committee comfortable with this? Any objections? And then move forward, focus on the action.
Thanks, Jennison. So the last link I just sent, they had a really interesting outline for developing your vision statement. And to start with was to define what we do as an output. So not what we're putting in, but what is coming out. So their example is a bakery makes bread, but the outcome is having consumers that enjoy that bread. And a consulting company gives advice, but the outcome is the success of others based on that advice. And a government department does a lot of things, but the outcome is better lives for the citizens they serve. So I guess we could start there by thinking about what is the outcome that we are aiming for with the CAP? What is it that we want it to achieve once it's been designed? And sorry, that was open for anybody.
Enhance the lives of our community. The lives of our community. Of our citizens, community citizens. Enhance the lives of our citizens, our community.
I might
of the
suggest,
citizens of our community.
I might suggest we try to find alternatives to the word citizen, as it has a lot of baggage associated with it right now.
Okay.
So I think community or our county, however we want to put it.
Okay, I agree. And
Christine, this might be where your framework falls in.
Yeah, I just put in something in the chat just to swag at it. Providing a framework for Alachua County and its local governments to address climate change with equitable environmental, social, and economic strategies. I'm sure it could be wordsmith, but
what do we want to come out of this, right? We want the lives to be enhanced, because that we created the resiliency to allow enhancement with climate change.
So, John, I think what you're saying is the output is that we have a community that is resilient resilient when it comes to climate impacts. We had something about that earlier.
Yes.
I like Bob's comment in the chat as well.
Thanks for pointing those out. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and I think resilience is one side of a coin. I think if we're being aspirational and I think we want to be able to say we have created solutions together, not just for adaptation and resilience, but also for mitigating climate impacts. So not to overthink it, but I do think like just the sole focus on resilience is
I agree.
yeah, it's not enough.
Sorry, I'm thinking out loud via taping.
I like what you have here and where this is going. Is a community that has created equitable environmental, social, and economic. Then you run into the problem, resilient strategies. Okay. Equitable environment. Okay. Do they need to be resilient? I love the word resilient. It's co-created equitable environmental, social, and economic strategies for addressing climate change. Equitable, environmental, social. And then when you get into the how this is done, then we can talk about addressing adaptation, mitigation, resilience. How does that sound?
So Bob says that resilient community is the output while the strategies can be left to the mission statement. So the adaptation mitigation portion may go in our mission statement. Oh, and Jennison suggested solutions instead of strategies. Amanda, do you have any thoughts? Not to put you on the spot, so don't feel pressured to do so. I just want to make sure you don't get missed.
No, I'm good. I'm taking all this in, and I feel like I could probably give some input, but I need to take it all in a little bit more.
Okay, thank you. So one of the things that Link also suggested was how would we quantify that we have achieved these things? Their example was a Microsoft computer on every desk. We could throw in something like for every resident. I'll tell you what, we are about 10 till 8. I will put this together and send it to Stacy so that it can be shared to everyone. And that will give everybody a chance to mull and ponder and wrestle with it until our next meeting. And we can revisit it at that point. Stacy, I see you were unmuted. Did you have a thought or a question or suggestion?
No, when you just said for all residents, you could just say for all. If you wanted
Perfect.
to be
Yes. Great. So unless anyone had any last burning thoughts about the vision statement, and we'll tackle the mission statement at another time. Sorry, that was supposed to be a question. Does anyone have any burning things that you want to make sure that I get down?
No,
Christine?
I don't have anything burning about that, but I think that with staff's expertise, if we provide kind of put this back and then provide kind of our thoughts on what we would want for the mission, maybe that would be something that they could look at and throw and put some ideas into, because I think my guess is they'll have some good ideas since we've kind of put this updated direction in.
Yeah, and the county's having our internal climate working group meeting on July 15th. So I can kind of share where you left off at that meeting next week.
Great. Thank you, Stacy. So that brings us to public comments. We have Bob and Ellen left with us. Do either of you have any comments that you would like to share for the good of the group? Oh, both of you. I don't know whose hand was up first.
I think I just clicked allow to talk on Bob.
Okay, great. Bob, go ahead.
Okay, well, hello, everybody. I guess you can hear me. You'll let me know if okay. Well, another great meeting. This is fun. As I said before, I've had a conflict with the farmers market on Thursdays, but we're taking some time off for the summer. In any case, I did just want to reinforce how great that webinar is that talked about the counties, cities to zero or counties to zero, whatever that was, race to zero cities. And I have had a chance, I thought some time ago, maybe it came from somebody on this committee of reviewing the Ann Arbor plan, which was the focus of that webinar, and it is very good. And also kind of reinforcing, I think it was Jennison that said, we need to move a little faster. They did their whole outreach and planning. I think it was like less than 80 days or something. It was phenomenal, and it included, seemed like everybody in town. I don't know. I think Ann Arbor and Gainesville maybe are pretty similar, but in any case, what I really wanted to comment on was, in the interest of being hopeful for the future, if anybody has any way to buck up the activists out here that were so disappointed by the county commission's vote the other night to deny the permit for the sand bluff. Now I know John has been working with a group to develop a community conversation about solar arrays in the west side of the county and everything. I just wonder if there's any update on that and kind of where we go from here. I don't know if the county commission asked for any input from this committee, but I'm sure they got a lot of input from a lot of people. So I don't really know. I guess they explained during the meeting the rationale for their votes, but it was a little disappointing, at least for me, and I know some others. So I wonder if you have any encouraging comments for us who are out here trying to make this stuff happen when it doesn't seem like anybody else is all that concerned.
I do know that there's talk at the Joint Water Climate Policy Board meeting of having a broader discussion about solar at their, and this is tentative, but at their October 25th meeting, and that's at 9:30 in Grace Night. So that's October 25th, the Joint Water Climate Policy. So that's 3 county commissioners, 3 city commissioners, and Commissioner Wells from Archer having a broader topic about solar.
Okay.
The only other thing I can offer, and I'm not exactly sure it's hopeful, but the legislature also passed a law this year in this session that said, except for this particular parcel that was at the meeting the other night, solar is now essentially an allowed use by right in agriculture districts. So we will see more solar, I think, but the county will actually have less say over where it goes. But we'll have more solar. So I don't know if that's going to be fair or equitable, but it's what I think we should anticipate.
Well, and I guess I'm getting more to the idea of, why did that vote go that way, given, the situation we're in? It seems to me there's some lack of understanding somewhere along the line. And I appreciate the opposition from the neighbors. It would have been a tough vote for anybody, but I'm just saying that it doesn't look very hopeful for these kinds of discussions or decisions coming up in the future, that people take these positions.
I don't know if this is hopeful, Bob, but I saw there was a letter to the editor addressing this sort of false dichotomy between like having solar and having climate justice or equity. That was, I'll have to find the link and and share it with everyone to read, because it kind of took head on from someone who's out there fighting for racial justice, saying this does not necessarily conflict with that fight, that these things can go hand in hand. It's not one or the other. And I think it's such a complex issue. It certainly merits a very pointed, oh, Mike, you didn't speak over me. But I think that like that conversation in and of itself would merit, a deeper conversation within this committee and with community members, because there's so much. Yeah, there's a lot of complexities. There are no simple solutions, but I think that just accepting that it's one or the other isn't the solution either. John, it looks like you're.
Yeah, I just want to say we have a subcommittee put together in EJCC, Tawanda's Jars group, and we've had speakers come and talk about solar and about siting. I can say that what ties this equity and racial justice to solar, it goes back to how we site solar farms. They cite them based on transmission lines, locations. They cite them based on value of property. All of these things were what created transmission lines to go through certain areas, and also property values. So you're not going to cite a solar farm where property values are very high and you have to put distribution lines in. So where we see sometimes communities, especially Black communities and rural farm communities, are usually where transmission lines have been sited, and where property value might not be as much as developing going to Newberry. So those kinds of inputs tend to get the kind of outputs that we are getting. But what we're trying to do, and we're actually putting together a community forum to talk about solar and the benefits of solar to the overall community. And I think information will help bridge this gap in talking about the benefits to the community, and also solar. For example, Florida Power and Light is working very hard to make solar fields more palatable. They're trying to do things that make it sexy, make it something that a community doesn't see it as a negative. So that's another thing that I think is really happening. And I think, Bob, that's going to help a lot. Making it a green patch, making it a dynamic rather than static, actually having live goats go in and clean around the solar panels. We're taking solar tours. Kiwanda groups, young ambassadors are going to take a tour of a solar field. So I think changing that concept and that feeling, that community feeling of what a solar field is going to help a lot.
Thank you, John. I appreciate the comments. Thank you all.
Thank you, John. Ellen, I think you can go ahead now.
Yeah, well, I appreciate what John just said and what Bob is raising, but I had 4 points. One, I want to make sure it's okay that I'm contributing, or that Bob and I or other, okay, well, okay, thank you. Not sure what the role of a silent active citizen is. I did want to give the committee kudos for wrestling with this mission and values situation. And just underscore, I've been on several boards that have gone through that. It is an agonizing process. Be patient with yourselves. That is what it is. And it is worth it at the end. So you have something to refer back to. So I just don't want anybody to feel frustrated that you didn't knock it out of the ballpark. It takes about 12 hours of intense conversation. So that's been my experience. The League of Women Voters Natural Resource Committee is very, very interested in building liaisons with whatever's going on in the county with conversations about climate. And so because I go to their meetings and your meetings, I've sort of unofficially become like a liaison person. So if there's anything of interest coming out of the Natural Resource Committee for the League, I would, I guess, hand it to staff for dissemination, or one of the Megans temporarily. So I don't know what we're doing. And then a comment on the churches. Don't leave synagogues and mosques out. I belong to a temple where the rabbi is extremely active in an interfaith group of all three religions, with, I think, a significant amount of clergy on his in that group. So don't, I can network you into that if you all don't already have that link going. Rabbi Michael Joseph from Shir Shalom. So, but I think, yes, a lot of temples and churches are doing green teams. And this is right up their alley and would be something they'd be happy to help facilitate community conversations for the community at large, not just their own members. Thank you for the opportunity to actually talk. That's it.
Thank you, Ellen. And we do appreciate your input. This is a citizens community climate advisory board, so we are always happy to have other voices chiming in. Do we have any other questions or public comments? Suggested for our next meeting, which will be, this says July 8th, but it'll be August. There is a suggestion for the waste component to discuss, to prioritize vulnerabilities. I think we'll need to put some more time on there for our mission and vision statement again. And I also added framing practice to that, but perhaps we will need to prioritize before we try framing. So maybe that will be too much for next month. Jennison?
Last month, I think it was last month, we had talked about inviting Marianne Schmenk and Nkwanda Jah from the Community Weatherization Coalition to attend and discuss weatherization and its role in the Climate Action Plan. And I did invite them, but do we want, do we want, they said they're happy to attend one of our meetings. Should I extend the invitation on behalf of the committee for the August meeting, or look ahead to future meetings? What would the committee like to do?
It sounds like you might also want some time to continue talking about this outreach and kind of planning for some stakeholder events.
So maybe Jennison for September or October.
Okay, yeah. Will do. I can give them the future dates. We know when we're meeting, so let's see what their calendars look like.
Thanks, Jennison. Hannah?
Yeah, with the outreach stuff, I'm happy to just like, well, I'll add it to the Google Doc or I'll email it if I'm able to get that brochure pamphlet done, and then we can take a look at it in the meeting and discuss that. And if there's any edits people want to make, we can do that there.
Thanks, Hannah. And Christine.
Yeah, I'd be really interested in knowing, I love what Hannah's been putting together. So if we can kind of flesh out some ideas of how we would like to do the outreach, and then find out from staff what's feasible, what can actually be supported.
I can put that discussion on our, at least on the county's internal meeting next week, but I think, yeah, some of the items that we've discussed, I feel like are doable, especially if it's just one of you going to a meeting and doing, or a event and doing some tabling, like the touch a truck, those types of things, could be a good way to get some feedback, but I'll talk to the attorneys.
And Stacy, were you taking notes on all of this? Or was someone taking notes like with our assigned homework and all of those sorts of things?
I believe
To go
Heather's
into the
taking some notes.
minutes.
I've been taking notes.
Thank you, Heather.
No problem.
Because I've been taking small ones, but not enough to probably help anyone else understand what they meant.
And Heather, if
Awesome.
you, Heather, if you don't mind just summarizing the action items, like for the CCAC and sending them to me, I can send them out in an email along with, there was a document that Lily just sent to me to share with everybody. So I can send a follow-up email that kind of just has the homework, since I know
Yep.
we might not have the official minutes ready yet.
Yep, sure thing.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you both. That will be very helpful. Thanks, Jennison. Awesome. Does anyone else have any questions, comments, or concerns for the good of the order? Then we shall adjourn and reconvene in August. Everybody stay dry. Don't fall into any sinkholes or puddles or down power lines or anything.